Are transformers effective for time series forecasting? So this paper came up in AAAI 2023, and this attracted a lot of attention because it's asking a very fundamental question. So transformers have been used in a lot of applications recently, including time series forecasting. So here are some of the papers that have modified the attention-based mechanism to be more suited for time series data, especially very long sequences. So one of the challenges that these papers work with is to come up with a better attention mechanism well suited for time series data, which is more efficient because it is quadratic and it could be problematic for very long sequences. So they look at a more sparser way of coming up with attention in all these papers, Informer and so on, log trans and so on. And then the paper Autoformer, for instance, looks at bringing in some of the principles from classic time series forecasting models like the Aremax model to look at seasonal components and trend and so on. So it adds a block where it actually tries to find these and then use an attention mechanism, based on a modified attention mechanism that addresses some of the challenges, instead of the naive attention mechanism which looks at all the previous inputs. So what this paper though, are transformers effective for time series forecasting says essentially is that using positional encoding techniques, that's primarily how transformers preserve temporal information in a time series, may not be good enough. So it says that it is still inevitable to have some temporal information loss after applying self-attention on top of the data if we use positional encoding as the only means to capture temporal information, right? So in order to make this point, and it also says this might be okay in NLP applications where you're looking at words in a sentence, and while there is the temporal information, the different words in the sentence could be, and the semantic relationship could be much stronger and more different compared to like a plain time series data where, let's say, you're trying to do demand forecasting, right? So to make this point, it proposes a simple linear layer which is taking L time steps of the past and trying to predict T time steps of the future. And what it's doing is it specifically takes some of these previous models we talked about, the Autoformer and FedFormer here, and it actually uses some concepts from these papers and uses it decomposes the raw data into trend component and the remainder seasonal component. So that's what some of these models like the Autoformer do, for instance. So it actually uses that part of it, but it replaces the attention mechanism itself used in these papers with this simple linear layer that it has here. So it adds like a couple of these linear layers and gets the final prediction. And they also have another variation, which is the n-linear model that subtracts the inputs by the last value of the sequence, and it goes through a linear layer and the subtracted part is added back, right? So it has these two variations, and it compares these models with a bunch of baselines, including the Autoformer, Informer, and so on, FedFormer, and so on, and says that these simpler models with just the linear layer instead of the attention layer perform better than these other models in a lot of data sets that they tried on. So at this point, this is a very interesting paper and it is definitely something we should read. But I would also suggest that, people look at other references. So there is recently a blog on Hugging Face which says, yes, transformers are effective for time series forecasting, and they specifically compare the Autoformer model with the D-linear model on, a few other use cases. So the bottom line is, now, are transformers effective for time series forecasting? This paper gives an interesting perspective, and so do other articles that actually talk about what this paper talks about. The bottom line is, this is a very quickly evolving space where new models are coming up to come up with better, more effective and efficient attention mechanisms, right? So we are looking to see, maybe other more interesting models to replace the attention mechanism that is used in NLP applications to work specifically for time series data. So let's keep looking. Thank you.